Let's turn back to Psalm 23, if you would. He makes me lie down in green pastures. God is the great doer in this psalm. He makes, he leads, he restores, he guides, he provides, he comforts, he prepares a table, he anoints, and he's the great host. So God is the great doer. He makes me lie down. There is such a thing as being too busy. Most people aren't busy enough. There are more people that are slothful than are people who overdo it. But God knows that we are made on the basis of stop and go, stop and go. And if you don't learn to stop, you soon won't be able to go. He makes me lie down. It's a symbol of justification. When you come to God, he doesn't give you a million works to do. He just declares you accepted, declares you righteous, and the Bible calls that justification. And after that you get working, to run and work the law commands, but gives me neither feet nor hands. Better news the gospel brings, it bids me fly and gives me wings. Well, justification is the gospel. He justifies the ungodly, makes me to lie down. The first whole day of our first parents was a rest day. Until we've learnt to rest in Christ for righteousness, we cannot work acceptably. So he makes me lie down. It's a symbol of justification, being declared righteous, being accepted of God at the beginning of our pilgrimage. He leads me beside quiet waters, and he restores my soul. Restores because we stumble often. So many Christians almost lose their way because they think, if I'm a Christian, I should never have said that. I should never have done that. And I shouldn't think these thoughts if I'm a Christian. Listen, Luther said, the Christian's always a sinner, not a willful sinner, but a sinner. Always a penitent, and always right with God. This is the essence of the gospel. He's gone to be guest with him that is a sinner, not that was. This man receiveth sinners, they still are. The difference is you come to hate sin and you fight it. But we all have failures. James chapter 3 and verse 2 says, in many things we all offend. We mustn't use that as an excuse. But we must not be discouraged by our failures. Romans 4:8 says that God does not record the sins of the saints. He does not impute them. The law can no more condemn you than it can condemn Christ, if you're a believer. Sin will have no dominion over you because you're not under law but under grace. Grace breaks the heart. Law cannot motivate. Law can't move anything on its own. Law can't save. Law for the sinner only condemns. But the good news of the gospel is that our substitute and surety has taken all our guilt, yesterday's, today's, and tomorrow's, and he has atoned for it. And we stand before high heaven as though we are without spot or blemish. But the real facts are we're sinners still. And we stumble often. But he restores our life, it says. Very important to understand the difference between justification and sanctification. Justification is declaring righteous. Sanctification is the making righteous. But justification is 100%, but it's outside of us. Bunyan was very worried because of his sins as a Christian. And he thought he heard a voice saying, your righteousness is in heaven. And he said, of course. The Lord, our righteousness. Jesus is my righteousness. So we are justified by righteousness that's outside of us. It's put to our account. It's credited to us. We're treated as though we were Christ. How come? Well, he was treated as though he was us. 2 Corinthians 5:14 to 21. God made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. How could Christ become sin? It was imputed to him. He was treated as though. That's why he suffered on the tree. We've switched places. It's Cinderella and the prince. We get the prince, he gets us, Cinderella. That's the good news, not good advice. Advice is something you and I have to do. Our spouse gives it to us all day long. Men can nag as well as women. But good news is different. That's about something that's happened, and it's about someone else. And it makes the heart to sing and the feet to dance. That's the gospel. It's good news. It's not good advice. So he restores us many times a day, because the law of God requires that every thought, every word, every deed be as good as sinless Adam could do. The law demands that we never choose a second best in any area, in thought, word or deed. Well, that was okay for the couple in the garden before they sinned. Never since. We stumble our way to heaven. But we're accepted. Never forget it. He restores us. He guides me in paths of righteousness. He's the Lord our righteousness. For his name's sake. Never ask God to give you your desserts or you've had it. It's for his name's sake, because of what he is. Because of what he is. He is love. How that could solve the whole world's problems. When you think of Afghanistan and Iraq and Zimbabwe and all the terrible places, if the world believed God is love, not Hollywood love, the love of 1 Corinthians 13, the love that suffers long and is kind, that envieth not, is not puffed up, thinketh no evil. That love, God is love, God's like that. If the world believed it, if you and I fully believed it, Lord our righteousness, for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. Now let me remind you of what I mentioned earlier. The sting of death is sin. We're the only creatures on earth that fear death. We are the only creatures on earth that stay awake at night worrying about what we've done. Your cat doesn't do that. Your dog doesn't do that. Dog may steal sausages from a butcher shop, never gets penitent and takes them back. We are the only creatures on earth that have a conscience. Somewhat seared, but if it's healthy, it condemns us many times a day, if it's healthy. If it never condemns you, you are in a very bad plight. So the sting of death is sin. He says, I'll fear no evil, even when death is getting nearer and nearer and nearer. And it's very near all of us. Don't we travel in cars? Most dangerous thing in the world isn't standing in front of a car, it's sitting behind the wheel of the car.